Hey guys, another video for our crime and emergency services in Japan playlist. Every now and again we get asked about something to do with sexual assault in Japan, and we sort of touched on it in some previous videos where different parts of Japanese culture have sort of overlapped with this particular topic. So I've sort of touched on it a few times, but there hasn't actually been a specific video about it. And apparently recently, now and again, all around the world, now and again there'll be something that'll come up that'll make it into international press, make it into the press in another country. Recently there was a story in the UK about a rape that had come up between a media personality and her co-worker or something. So now and again it comes up, and then the topic gets brought up that, you know, in Japan it's underreported and all that sort of thing, and then that one thing leads to another, and we end up getting emails, would you address it, would you address it? So one of our supporters on Patreon sent us a message and said, you know, do you want to talk about this? So the answer is no, not really. Had enough of controversial topics recently. Every time we cover a controversial topic we end up with a whole heap of grief, but it probably does deserve one. So a few major points when it comes to sexual assault in Japan, sexual assault and rape. That it is true. What is often reported is that it's underreported in Japan. In other words, you know, people are the victim of sexual assault or of rape in Japan and they don't report it. They don't tell the police, and that is true. And it's also recognised. They do know that they do know that in Japan. And recently there has been some campaigns, half-hearted campaigns, to try and sort of rectify that. And as a result, the actual incidences of reported sexual assaults and rapes in Japan recently has risen, and that seems to be not because the incidences have increased, it's because more people are reporting it, which is obviously a good thing. So as for why it's not reported, it's terrible it's not reported. It's really, really bad it's not reported. But when you're familiar with the way, and a lot of you guys would be familiar with the way Japanese society works, it's not surprising. It's terrible, it's bad, it needs to, it obviously is an unacceptable situation, but it's not surprising when you know how Japanese society works. I mean, first of all, it's a patriarchal society that's dominated by men. That's, you know, and that's as far as the governments and as far as the companies and that sort of thing, they're dominated by men. Men have all the power in Japan. Generally, not always the case. There are some powerful ladies in Japan as well, but generally, when it comes to government and to companies, businesses, Japan, the men dominate. That's one thing. The other thing is, a big point is that in Japan, society is all about maintaining harmony. It's all about maintaining the harmony, and for that reason, rocking the boat in any way is considered to be bad form. So you wouldn't get a lot of support. So to tell anybody that you'd been a victim of being of a sexual assault or of a rape or something like that would be really difficult to do here, because, you know, people don't even talk about their personal issues usually with each other. So to talk about something as big as that with other people, and a lot of Japanese people would see that as upsetting the harmony. And why is she talking to me about this? You know, I don't want to hear about this. Why is she talking to me about this? And as bad as all this is going to sound, again, we don't make this happen. Whenever we report on things like this, we get a whole heap of flack. We don't make Japanese society like it is. We're just telling you what we see, and this is what we see, is that people don't want to talk about stuff. Same as on TV. You know, television is 99.9% warm and fuzzy stuff, or fluff, just meaningless fluff, where people just watch just fluff, just sort of game shows and silly games, and, you know, they don't want to talk about difficult topics on TV. No one wants to, they don't want to watch it, they don't want to hear it. You know, if they do talk about some difficult topic on TV, chances are most of the viewers will change the channel, because they just don't want that upsetting the harmony thing, you know. Not to say this is always the case. There is actually a campaign at the moment, a no means no campaign at the moment in Japan, and there are activists and there are people that rock the boat and there are people that get up on TV and say things. But this is just generally in Japanese society, rocking the boat or causing any sort of ripples is considered to be bad form. And it's easy to imagine, it's really easy to imagine that, you know, that a girl is a victim of a sexual assault, or a lady is a victim of a sexual assault or of a rape or of being molested or something, not wanting to make a big deal about it. You can easily imagine that, you know. And I mean, one of the most ones we hear about all the time is on the trains. And I mean, really, the on the trains one's really bad, but it's probably the tip of the iceberg, really. I mean, we hear about that all the time. The international media love talking about that one. But I mean, really, in the big picture, that's just the tip of the iceberg. You know, the stuff that goes on, like for example, in companies, because men have most of the power in the companies. You know, the sexual assault's one that came up recently was a media personality, but it's really common. We've seen it. We've been sitting in an izakaya in a restaurant and seen a company group sitting around a table, and some old guy who looked like the boss, he was some baldy 60-year-old fat, like a sad-looking, boss-looking dude, was chasing a girl who would have been about 18, you know, a young lady, chasing her around and around the table. And like, oh, I'm going to get you, I'm going to get you. And all the co-workers are all laughing. Everyone's laughing, including the women. You know, and it's, again, it's, you know, the girl really didn't look like she was, yada, yada, you know. And she didn't look like she was enjoying herself at all, as you can imagine. And some of the people at the table didn't look super impressed either, but nobody was going to rock the boat and say, hey boss, leave her alone, you know. And eventually she went and sat down next to some other co-workers, and it was, everyone made a big joke about it, you know. And I mean, he didn't actually touch her, but you can just imagine if that's the behaviour that's a big joke around the table with all the co-workers, you can just imagine if that guy gets her alone, what he'd be like, you know what I mean? So, and then what's she going to do? You know, the co-workers all laugh it off. If she makes a big deal about it, what's going to happen to her career? So quite often with these sort of topics, society type topics about Japan, quite often you'll see a parallel between what Japan is like now and what some other countries were like maybe 60 years ago. You know, maybe 60 years ago in some Western countries, the attitude towards sexual harassment and sexual assault were probably similar. You know, and then those countries have evolved and you know, have brought in laws and brought in a different way of thinking that says that behaviour is unacceptable. Whereas in Japan, we're still back in the 1950s when it comes to this sort of stuff, you know, and nobody wants to make waves, nobody wants to say anything. And if you did say something, if you walked over to that table and said, listen, fat old man, leave that young girl alone, the people at that table would see you as being the problem, because everything was okay and they're all having a good laugh until you came along and said something. You know, it's that deeply ingrained into society. So that's the first problem as far as the reporting concerned. You know, people aren't going to want to make waves. They're not going to. Apparently, the police have a habit if alcohol's involved, the police don't want to pursue it, because when alcohol's involved, they see it as everybody's alcohol's involved, and if the victim was drinking as well, it's very difficult. It's too difficult. It's too difficult if alcohol was involved, because, you know, it complicates things. And what did she really do? And that sort of thing. So it's just so deeply into Japanese society. No one wants to know about it. That's the problem. That's the problem. So, and because you know, the ladies know that. They know that if they go and report it to the co-worker, or report it to their boss, or report it to the police, that nobody's going to want to know about it. Everyone's going to want to sort of play it down and sort of sweep it away. And they don't want the other thing is there's an element of embarrassment as well here. You know, that the people don't talk about their personal stuff. You know, they just don't usually talk about their personal stuff. So to actually describe a situation where you were assaulted or where you were raped, describing that to another person, even a friend or a family member, could be really difficult. So it's you know, this is really terrible stuff, but it's just so deeply ingrained in Japanese society. Is so, when it comes to communication and when it comes to personal relationships and when it comes to all this sort of stuff, Japanese society is so messed up that it just trying to resolve or trying to address something as serious and as complicated as this is just too much for them generally. I mean, generally, I mean, hey, there's exceptions to this, of course. I mean, there are victims who stand up and point to the perpetrator, and the perpetrator gets convicted and put in jail. Of course, it happens. You know, if you look at the statistics, if you look up the statistics for rape and sexual assaults in Japan, they exist. So this isn't always the case. Often, you know, he did it and he gets put in jail. It does happen. But we're just talking about why it's underreported, why it's not being reported as often as it really is happening. And this society thinking and this society way of being is the problem. That's why it's being underreported. As for why it actually happens, look, it's really, really bad, but it's not surprising when you live here. It's not surprising. We've talked about the porn here before, and it's all 99.9% of it. If you check into a hotel in Japan, you flick through the channels. If you flick through the porn channels, you usually get the first 15-20 seconds of each movie before it stops, and then you got to put in a card and pay for it. But almost inevitably, as you're flicking through the channels, it's yada yada, and it's young girls, very young girls, being raped, basically being raped by older dudes, and quite often, you know, 2 or 3 older dudes, you know, and that's this underlying thing about sex right through Japanese society. We've talked about it before. Not always the case again, but this is what you will see. This is what we see all the time. Is this underlying, and you see it to a lesser extent on mainstream television. Really, really cute young girls sitting there with older guys going, and the girls are going, yada, yada, and running away from them. And yada means I don't want it, I don't want it. It's the same as saying no, right? It's the same as saying no. And this is really deeply in Japanese society, because the way it's seen is that good girls don't have sex, right? You know, we talked about that before, like groups like AKB48, where the girl bands, girl groups, that they have to sign an agreement that they won't have a boyfriend. If they want to be in the band, they're not allowed to have a boyfriend, because it's all about cultivating this sexy but virginal sort of image, right? And that's deep, deep into Japanese society, that good girls, and again, we're back in the 50s, aren't we? Good girls aren't into sex, right? Good girls don't want sex. And then the dudes that do want it, you know, good boys don't want sex either, quite often in Japanese society, but those that do have this lecherous, rapey type attitude about it. So the end result is that Japanese porn and Japanese mainstream TV has this underlying innocent girl going, oh, no, 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 and a deviant guy going, you know, and that's what the porn is inevitably like that. And then the mainstream TV is inevitably like that too. You get these young girls sitting there looking all cute, these old guys being lecherous, and the girls going no, 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 and sort of brushing it off. And look, on that topic, you know, this is getting a bit close to the bone, but those guys that are watching this that have had Japanese girlfriends will be able to testify that it's really, really common in real life in Japan for Japanese girls, because you know, people do have sex in Japan, of course, and it's really common to be having sex with a Japanese girl and for her to say yada 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 yada, which means no, 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 yada yada, right? And it means no, it means I don't want it. And so so without wanting to get too personal here, then you stop and say, are you okay? What is it? What's the matter? What's the matter? Nothing, more. Oh, okay. And then, you know, 30 seconds later, yada, yada. And it's this game. They don't mean no. They don't mean no. It's just this thing that I'm a good girl, so yada, yada, I don't want it. But in actual fact, they do. And that often leads to big conversations then between non-Japanese guys and Japanese girls, where you've got to explain to them, look, if you say yada to me, I'm not going to do it, because you're saying no, right? And this underlying thing. And again, it's not always the case, but it's really common. You know, I've sat around in conversations with foreign guys before talking about this, and a lot of the foreign guys, yeah, I've experienced the yada yada. And of course, most guys don't like it, of course, because the girl's saying no, 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 you know. And then you could have a big conversation with them and say, look, if you say yada to me, I'm going to stop, because I'm not going to do it if you say yada. And I mean, this is getting, I really didn't want to get down this personal, but it's really important, because this is giving you an insight into what the culture's like, and so it's easy to imagine. It's easy to imagine that with co-workers together after a night of drinking, and co-workers drinking together here is really common, and they end up alone somewhere, and the girl's going yada yada yada, and the whole image the image the guy has and the image that the girl has is that's normal for the girl to say no and the guy to do it anyway. They've got this image thing going on, and it's easy to imagine how that could go down the wrong track. And so that's, you can imagine with a girl and like a boyfriend-girlfriend type relationship where she's going yada yada, and he doesn't know any different. That's just what he does. So it's messed up. You can see it's messed up. It's messed up in a lot of the girls' minds, and it's messed up in a lot of the guys' minds. In English-speaking countries now, no means no. We all know what that means, right? No means no. That's the end of the story, right? But in Japanese society, yada doesn't mean no. Usually in that situation, yada doesn't mean no, but sometimes it does. So you can imagine in a boyfriend-girlfriend situation how that could get messed up, and then, co-workers and drunken co-workers together and things like that. And then, of course, we've got the total stranger situation too. You've got this thing, and because a lot of people don't believe, and again, controversial topic, lots of people don't believe that porn influences people's thinking, but either it influences their thinking or it's a reflection of their thinking. But in a society where rape is considered to be normal sexual behaviour, you can imagine, and because this is what we get usually ladies and girls are safe walking the streets in Japan, but occasionally, of course, you'll get some girl gets abducted off the street by a guy or by a couple of guys and taken away somewhere and raped, and sometimes killed, sometimes not, and that happens too. That happens too. And you got the thing on the train again, and they actually have, that's really common fantasy in Japanese porn, is the thing on the train. They have they'll have Japanese porn, there's a girl standing on the train in a school uniform and two old guys grab her and rape her. That's really common. There's actually a cafe in Tokyo that has train carriage inside. It's sort of like a snack, Japanese snack sus place, right? And they've got this train carriage set up inside the cafe, and guys go and sit in the train carriage, and sexy girls come and stand in front of them dressed in school uniforms, and the guys touch them and have fantasies about them and stuff like that. That's in Tokyo. So, occasionally you get these things recently where they're having these campaigns about reporting rape and about no means no and that sort of stuff. But when you see all this other stuff that's so deeply, the whole thing, Japanese TV is just a shocker. When you watch Japanese TV, they're prudish, so it's not like the porn's straight out rape, but the TV, it's just same mentality, but just a little bit more subtle. And the way the girls are treated, and someone commented on one of the videos recently about how they pan cameras, and this is something that they just do in mainstream Japanese TV. If a girl walks out onto the set of Japanese TV, what they often do is the cameraman pans from her feet up her legs to her face, scans her whole body with the camera close up. And that's just mainstream TV. That's just 7:30 at night, 7 o'clock at night, mainstream TV. Just some ladies walked out onto the set and they're talking to her, and the cameraman just scans from her feet right up to her face really, really slowly. There's a lot of behaviour on mainstream TV here that just wouldn't be accepted in other countries. People would be ringing up and complaining, but here it's considered to be normal. Nobody complains, everybody thinks it's normal. And this is the thing, it's just like living in the 50s, it really is, and this is often the case. The technology here is often cutting edge 21st century technology, but the society, there is so much of Japanese society that's like living in the 50s, and everybody's living in the 50s, which means if you try and point any of this out, nobody gets it. So we've got girls, we've got young girls in our family, we've got, our family's full of young girls and young ladies of all ages. And if we try and point any of this out or talk about any of this, we sit and watch TV. New Year's Day is a classic, watching TV with the family. And we see stuff all the time, sexualizing ladies and disrespecting ladies and old guys chasing young girls, and we see this sort of shit all the time. And if you point it out to your Japanese friends, they just that you get an uncomfortable laugh from them. You know, that scene in the izakaya with the old guy chasing the young girl around, you know, the Japanese people that I was with on that particular day, you know, they just laugh it off, because that's how people react to stuff like that here. You know, and you know, one of them called him ecchi, which means he's like devious, you know, he's like, but he, oh, ecchi old man, ha ha ha, see, they laugh it off. So it's just like a lot of this societal stuff in Japan, it's still back in the 50s, and it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot for it to evolve. You know, there are groups that are trying to get things rolling with the no means no, and encouraging ladies to report these sorts of things. But you can just imagine, I mean, the family sort of incest, the same sort of, that sort of stuff that a lot of other countries struggled with in the 50s, where you got the uncles molesting their nieces, and you've got you know, senior co-workers molesting junior co-workers, and you've got, you know, strangers feeling up strangers on the train, and you've got, you know, and then you've got the total strangers pulling girls off the street and dragging them off to their house, and, you know, or dragging them off to a park somewhere, or down by a river somewhere or something, and raping them and that sort of stuff. And, you know, it's so deep in Japanese culture that's why we're always skeptical when you get stuff like this, and people are always saying, oh, you need to protest and you need to do something about changing it, and it's the only way to change things, and you got to do this and you got to do that. You know, change happens so slowly here. And again, we've got a patriarchal society here that's controlled by old men. You know, so, you know, there are ladies in Parliament here, and there are ladies that you know, have power here in business and companies and things, but they're a really small minority. And most of Japanese society, Japanese life is just controlled by old men. And so their motivation to do anything about this sort of stuff is really low. And you can see it's a slippery slope too, you know, from just the normal mainstream television and the way they sexualize women, and you know, the anime and the manga's the same, and you know, it's right through Japanese society. So from that to the rapes, it's not you can see it's a slow progression from one to the other. It's not surprising. It's not surprising. So again, look, this is a sensitive topic. It's a controversial topic. There's always people that get overly emotional about stuff like this, particularly the ones who don't listen to what was actually said, and they react and they get emotional, and we get people unsubscribe, and any sort of difficult topic like this that isn't all, you know, happy and smiley and difficult topic, and that a lot of people don't want to hear it. You know, whenever we cover a topic like this, you get a whole heap of people unsubscribe and leave abusive comments and everything. And look, if you've got other opinions and you want to leave a comment, please leave your comment and your other opinion, but please keep it polite and not insulting. Otherwise, we'll have to delete it, because we just don't waste time on that sort of stuff. You know, we really don't like covering topics like this, because every time we do, there's a big hassle. You know, we lose subscribers, and we get all sorts of hassles and aggro people, and you can't win with topics like this either. There's people will argue both sides, will accuse us of taking both sides of this discussion. You know, we'll get accused of making excuses for it, and we'll get excused from being too critical of Japanese society. So we will get both. And that's usually what happens. Oh, you're making excuses for their bad behaviour. No, we're not. Oh, you're being too critical of Japanese society. No, we're not. But we'll get both. It's inevitable with these controversial topics. We get both. They can't both be right? We can't be being too critical and making excuses, surely. Anyway, there it was. Really didn't want to touch that topic, but anyway, there it was. Sexual abuse in Japan. More videos coming soon.